recording as well. Over the last decade, scientists have discovered that this excess CO2 is actually changing the chemistry of the sea and proving harmful for many forms of marine life. This process is known as ocean acidification. A more acidic ocean could wipe out species, disrupt the food web, and impact fishing, tourism, and other human endeavor that relies on the sea. The change is happening fast, and it will take fast action to slow or stop it. Over the last 250 years, oceans have absorbed 530 billion tons of CO2, triggering a 30% increase in ocean acidity. Before people start burning coal and oil, ocean pH had been relatively stable for the previous 20 million years. But researchers predict that if carbon emissions continue at their current rate, ocean acidity will more than double by 2100. The polar regions will be the first to experience changes. Projections show that the Southern Ocean around Antarctica will actually become corrosive by 2050. The new chemical composition of our oceans is expected to harm a wide range of ocean life, particularly creatures with shells. The resulting disruption to the ocean ecosystem could have a widespread ripple effect and further deplete already struggling fisheries worldwide. Increased acidity reduces carbonate, the mineral used to form the shells and skeletons of many shellfish and corals. The effect is similar to osteoporosis, slowing growth and making shells weaker. If pH levels drop enough, the shells will literally dissolve. This process will not only harm some of our favorite seafood, such as lobsters and mussels, but will also injure some species. I just lost my place. But will also injure some species of smaller marine organisms, things such as pteropods and coccolithores. I don't know why they do this to us, coccolithores. You've probably never heard of them, but they form a vital part of the food web. If those smaller organisms are wiped out, the larger animals that feed on them could suffer as well. Delicate corals may face an even greater risk than shellfish because they require very high levels of carbonate to build their skeletons. Acidity slows reef building, which could lower the resiliency of corals and lead to their erosion and eventual extinction. The tipping point for coral reefs could happen as soon as 2050. Coral reefs serve as the home for many other forms of ocean life. Their disappearance would be akin to rainforests being wiped out worldwide. Such losses would reverberate through marine environment and have profound social impacts as well, especially on the fishing and tourism industry. Ultimately, though, reducing the amount of carbon dioxide absorbed into the oceans may be the only way to halt acidification. The same strategies needed to fight global warming on land can also help in the seas. The acidification of our oceans is the hidden side of the world's carbon crisis, says Lisa Swutani, a Natural Resources Defense Council ocean scientist, and only reinforces that we need to make changes in how we fuel our world, and we need to do it quickly. And that's from the NRDC.org. So that's National Resources Defense Council.org, right? .org, a nonprofit. It's an article, Ocean Acidification, the Other CO2 Problem. And that's from 2013. And then we have our graph here, right? Historical and projected pH and dissolved CO2. So I don't know if you guys talked about pH in science, right? If you go at 7, it's basically what neutral on the pH scale, where water is supposed to be. And anything above that's a base, anything below that is a acid, and either way is bad because it's corrosive and it's toxic. So our pH we see dropping over time, right? So it's on that X axis across the bottom. It starts at 1850, I think, Yeah, 1850, 1875, 1900. So it's going up in 25-year increments from 1850 and then projects out to 2100. And then it's showing the rise in the CO2 level that's been dissolved in the ocean. So we see where it's, as it's increased, that the pH level continues to fall. So taking a look at all of our information here. And so it says at the bottom, as the ocean concentration of carbon dioxide increases, so does acidity, causing pH to decline. And let's take a look here. Let's go to Etta, question 1.
Okay, it says, which sentence best explains why the authors provide background information in paragraph 1, 2, and 3? A, the author wished to contrast carbon absorption in the atmosphere and in the oceans. B, the authors assume that many readers are unfamiliar with the problem of ocean acidification. C, the authors wish to emphasize the ways in which human activities affect the oceans. Or D, the author assumes that readers will disagree with their claims about ocean acidification. Is it A?
It's B. So there's a lot of explanation, right? And like they use that analogy about comparing it to osteoporosis. So with a lot of explanation, they're likely talking to more of a general audience, right? And they want to make sure that everybody understands some of that jargon or lingo, that they use. And everybody has a firm grip on and understanding what they're saying. So 1 is B as in boy. 2, we're going to look at more ocean acidity. And how about Christiana? Could you read number 2?
Number 2. The data in paragraph 4, 5, and 6A support the claim that changes in ocean acidity are happening fast. B, show that efforts to reduce carbon
emissions?
Emissions have been effective. C, challenge the claim that the atmosphere is not the only victim of fossil fuels. D, illustrates how ocean acidity can harm coral reefs and other sea life. A?
Yeah, A. It supports the claim that changes in ocean acidity are happening fast, right? Those 4, 5, 6 paragraph, all giving you evidence, right? Very solid evidence of that case. So our special guest has joined us. I'm going to pause our recording real quick here. Oh.
Hi.
Two. Okay. All right, back at it. So 3, our same passage, our same graph. Sasha Gay, could you read question 3?
It says osteoporosis is a disease in which the bones become weak and fragile. The authors compare osteoporosis with what is happening to shellfish in order to A, help readers understand how acidity affects shellfish and coral. B, show that human skeletons can be affected by ocean acidity. C, explain how the mineral carbonate functions in shell formation. And D, teach readers about the nutritional needs of shellfish. A?
Yeah, A. So it helps readers understand how acidity affects shellfish, right? There's an analogy for you. It helps you understand. So instead of like trying to explain acidity and shells, they use something similar, to explain it. So osteoporosis, weakening of the bones, is much like what happens to the shells on a shellfish. So A for number 3. 4, moving right along, more ocean acidification. Number 4, let's go to Tracy.
Which statement best explains the relationship between paragraph 9 and 10? A, the paragraph 10 provides the information about the theropods and cocolypso frogs are and where they are found. B, the paragraph 9 describes small organisms that inhabit coral reefs, and paragraph 10 describes large organisms. C, paragraph 9 identifies small organisms, and paragraph 10 explores how they are affected by acidification. Paragraph 10 explains why the effects of ocean acidity on theropods and coral are significant. Could I view the paragraph 9 and 10?
Sure.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, this project will not harm from the out of every seafood. And structure must will ensure moment clean out and erupt and if those okay. Could I view the answer? I think B.
It's D. It's D. Paragraph 10 explains why the effects of ocean acidity on pteropods and coccolithophores are significant. Coccolithophores, I think. Yeah, so 9, explains, it's not just to, like things, our favorite seafood, things we're familiar with like lobster and mussels, but those smaller organisms that the larger organisms feed on will also be affected, right? So that's the relationship between 9 and 10. So 4 is D as in dog. 5, let's go to Grace. Where am I going? Number 5.
Okay. Which statement best explains the implicit purpose of the passage? A, to interest readers in the life cycles of coral reefs and their inhabitants. B, to inspire readers to visit the coral reef before they disappear. C, to encourage readers to reduce their use of fossil fuels. And D, to alert readers to the challenges the fishing industry faces. C.
C, right? That's definitely right there at the end. It even mentions, right, acidification of our oceans. And then right at the very end, only reinforces that we need to make changes in how we fuel our world. And that's implicitly stating, right, we can infer by that because of the use of fossil fuels that they're talking about our, reduction in the use of fossil fuels there. It's an implicit statement, right? We don't explicitly state it, but that's what they're implying there. So 5 is C. And we have, no, that's the same passage. They just changed the format a little bit there. So same passage. And we have a little drag and drop here. So we're looking at supported claims and unsupported claims. So let's go through here and see. We'll read them off one at a time here. So human activity is likely the cause of increased CO2 emissions. That claim, is it supported by evidence in our passage?
Yeah, supported.
It is supported. Yeah, human activity. So we roll right along here. Ocean acidity has increased rapidly in the past 250 years.
Okay. Yeah.
Supported?
Yeah.
Yeah, ocean acidity has increased. Humans must act quickly to save the coral reefs and shellfish.
Supported. Yeah.
That is supported as well. And that leaves, there's actually just one that wasn't, that was an unsupported claim. So it says the tipping point for coral reefs could happen as soon as 2050. They don't really give any additional evidence other than what we're charting. So, you know, and that's also a projection. So there's not necessarily support for that. You also need to go ahead and throw in the details not provided into the other unsupported box so we don't get a wrong answer there when we submit it. So our supported, you know, supported with evidence, human activity is likely the cause of the increase of CO2. Ocean acidity has increased rapidly in the past 250 years. Humans must act quickly to save the coral reefs. I'll have supporting evidence for that. Unsupported claim, though, the tipping point for coral reefs could happen as soon as 2050. And that's something else, you know, we talk a lot about signal words and stuff. If there's words like could, would, should, that is a little iffy, right? So if it just said the tipping point for coral reefs will happen as soon, or will happen in 2050, right? We eliminate that sort of questionable statement, could happen as soon as. That's a little bit of a weak statement. So you may want to, you know, that's something you could look at as maybe, well, maybe that's not supported then. So we should be able to submit here. We got all our little green boxes for 6 and 7. We are still, yes, looking at the same passage here for number 7. Nilda, could you read number 7 for us?
Yes. Which claim from the passage does the graph support? A. Excess CO2 is actually changing the chemistry of the sea. B. Ocean pH has been relatively stable for the previous 20 million years. C. The polar ridges will be the first to experience changes. D. The strategies needed to fight global warming on land also can help in the seas. A.
Yeah, A, right? So that's changing the chemistry of the ocean, changing the pH balance or the pH level of the ocean. It keeps falling there. So yep, A for 7. And so, oh, and now we have a new passage. And I'm going to go ahead, I'll go ahead and read for us today. So Jimmy Carter in 1977, and this is an address to the nation on energy. There was an energy crisis. It was pretty bad there in the late 70s. You know, gas prices were crazy, even worse than they were, you know, by today's standards. There were people lining up at the pumps. So I'm imagining this may revolve around this. So, and Jimmy Carter in his own right was a bit of an environmentalist. So he says, tonight I want to have an unpleasant talk with you about a problem that is unprecedented in our history. With the exception of preventing war, this is the greatest challenge that our country will face during our lifetime. The energy crisis has not yet overwhelmed us, but it will if we do not act quickly. It's a problem that will not be able to solve in the next few years, and it's likely to get progressively worse through the rest of this century. We must not be selfish or timid if we hope to have a decent world for our children and grandchildren. We simply must balance our demand for energy with our rapidly shrinking resources. By acting now, we can control our future instead of letting the future control us. 2 days from now, I will present to the Congress my energy proposals. Its members will be my partners, and they have already given me a great deal of valuable advice. Many of these proposals will be unpopular. Some will cause you to put up with inconveniences and to make sacrifices. The most important thing about these proposals is that the alternative may be a national catastrophe. Further delay can affect our strength and our power as a nation. Our decision about energy will test the character of the American people and the ability of the president and the Congress to govern this nation. This difficult effort will be the moral equivalent of war, except that we will be uniting our efforts to build and not to destroy. Now, I know that some of you doubt that we face real energy shortages. The 1973 gas lines are gone, and with this springtime weather, our homes are warm again. But our energy problem is worse tonight than it was in 1973 or a few weeks ago in the dead of winter. It's worse because more waste has occurred and more time has passed without our planning for the future, and it will get worse every day until we act. The oil and natural gas that we rely on for 75% of our energy are simply running out. In spite of increased effort, domestic production has been dropping steadily at about 6% a year. Imports have doubled in the last 5 years. Our nation's economic and political independence is becoming increasingly vulnerable. Unless profound changes are made to lower oil consumption, we now believe that early in the 1980s, the world will be demanding more oil than it can produce. The world now uses about 60 million barrels of oil a day, and demand increases each year about 5%. This means that just to stay even, we need the production of a new Texas every year, an Alaskan North Slope every 9 months, or a new Saudi Arabia every 3 years. Obviously, this cannot continue. If we fail to act soon, we will face an economic, social, and political crisis that will threaten our free institutions. But we still have another choice. We can begin to prepare right now. We can decide to act while there is still time. That is the concept of the energy policy that we will present on Wednesday. Our national energy plan is based on 10 fundamental principles. The first principle is that we can have an effective and comprehensive energy policy only if the government takes responsibility for it, and if the people understand the seriousness of the challenge and are willing to make sacrifices. I believe that this can be a positive challenge. There is something especially American in the kinds of change that we have to make. We've always been proud through our history of being efficient people. We've always been proud of our ingenuity, our skill at answering questions. Now we need efficiency and ingenuity more than ever. We've always been proud of our leadership in the world, and now we have a chance again to give the world a positive example. We've always been proud of our vision of the future. We've always wanted to give our children and our grandchildren a world richer in possibilities than we have had ourselves. They are that we must provide for now. They are the ones who will suffer most if we don't act. That was Carter in 77. Let's go back to Etta for number 8.
Okay, it says, which statement best explains why paragraph 1 displays faulty logic or reasoning? A, the author appeals to readers' sense of patriotism. B, the author presents a false cause and effect relationship. C, the author provides facts that are irrelevant to the claim. Or D, the author uses exaggerated emotional language. Is it A?
So it's D. If we go back to that first paragraph, it's, some of that strong language, right? And we were thinking about appeals to emotion and a scare tactic. So, a problem that is unprecedented in our history. The exception of preventing war, this is the greatest challenge that our country will face during our lifetime. We talked about hyperbole, right? And I mean, it's certainly a problem. It's a problem we're still dealing with today, or even more so. But that type of language, right, is trying to grab the reader or the audience's attention and is a little, exaggerated there. But The intention being that he's trying to, reach out to the audience. He wants to grab their attention. But it is faulty reasoning to do that. It's faulty logic. So D as a dog for 8. Number 9, Christiana, would you like to read number 9?
Okay, number 9. In paragraph 5, the author acknowledged that many of his ideas will be unpopular and states that, unpopular, that the alternative to his proposal may be a national catastrophe. Why does he make this statement? A, to frighten readers about what the future could hold. B, to remind readers of the nation's accomplishment. C, to anticipate and respond to possible conflicting point of view. D, to compare and contrast his ideas with past proposal. Is it D?
It's C. So, what he's laying out here is not popular. This got Carter in trouble in many ways because he would tell it like it is. And he talked to the American people in a way that was not always, lollipops and rainbows. He would tell the American people, it's like, look, we may need to sacrifice. We might need to tighten our belts and things like that. And, we don't like hearing that. So in here, that's what he's addressing. So this, obviously, maybe looking for new energy sources, or maybe cutting back on how much energy we use, things like that, would not be popular. So that's sort of addressing that and anticipating what the other opposing viewpoints will be. So C, and if we look like at paragraph 5, right, he says many of these proposals will be unpopular. So he's addressing the idea of how this will be and maybe potential counterclaims. So some will cause you to put up with inconveniences and make sacrifices. Nobody wants to hear that. The most important thing about these proposals is that the alternative may be a national catastrophe. So then, he gets back into it. It's like, we can't delay anymore. Our strength and our power as a nation is in peril, basically. So C for 9. 10. Sticking with President Carter here. Sasha Gay, you want to read question 10?
Throughout paragraph 7, which begins, now I know that some of you may doubt. The author repeats the word worse. This repetition creates a sense of A, fright, and emphasizes the dangers of not taking action. B, urgency, and emphasizes the seriousness of the problem. C, hopelessness, and makes the crisis seem overwhelming. D, anger, and makes the opposition seem weak. B.
Yeah, sense of urgency he's building there. Paragraph 7. So, the gas lines are gone to spring. Where's it go? But our energy problem is worse tonight than it is in 73. It's worse because more waste has occurred as time has passed, and it will get worse every day until we act. So that repetition we've talked about before, right? That helps emphasize a point. And in this case, a sense of urgency that we need to act and the seriousness of it. 10 is B as in boy. 11. Tracy, would you read question 11?
Which statement best describes the relationship between paragraph 7 and 8? A, paragraph 8 claims that energy shortages worsening, and paragraph A give evidence to support the claim. B, paragraph 7 identifies the worst shortest, and paragraph 8 describes sorted in great detail. C, paragraph 8 describes the negative pursue a new energy policy, and paragraph 8 describes the positive. Did the paragraph 7 introduce the worst problem of waste energy, and paragraph 8 detail the positive solution? Could I take a look to the paragraph 7 and 8?
There you go.
No, could I view the answer again? D.
It's A.
A.
So paragraph 7 claims that the energy shortages are worsening. So he shows, it's like, okay, we think our problems are over. The 1970s gas lines are gone, blah, blah, blah. But it's actually getting worse, right? So that's paragraph 7. That's sort of his main point there for paragraph 7 is to show that, or to state that it's getting worse. And then paragraph 8, he gives us evidence of that, right? Of our growing need for oil. Oil and natural gas, we rely on for 70% of our energy. It's simply running out. And then he goes into, about our domestic production has dropped steadily, about 6% a year. The imports have doubled in the last 5 years. So he gives us some statistics about how our consumption is increasing, getting worse. So 11 is A. 12, sticking with Mr. Carter still. How about Grace? Can you read 12 for us?
Okay. Paragraph 10 begins, if we fail to act soon. Which statement best explains how the structure and purpose of this paragraph are related? A, in the first sentence, the author describes a crisis. The word but in the second sentence signals that in the rest of the paragraph, the author explains a way to avoid the crisis. B, in the first sentence, the author lists the types of crises the United States could face. And in the rest of the paragraph, he describes this crisis in greater detail. C, in the first half of the paragraph, the author states the opinions of his opponents. In the second half of the paragraph, the author responds to those views. And D, the author uses the word now to signal a shift in time between the event described in the first two sentences and the event described in the rest of the paragraph. Paragraph 10. Is it A?
Yeah.
Or B? Oh,
There you
okay.
go. Yeah, it is A. Right. So he starts with this crisis, and then he starts to explain how. So we fail to act soon, we're going to have an economic, social, and political crisis. And then he goes on, but we have another choice. We can begin to prepare to fight now. We can decide to act while there is still time. That is the concept of the energy policy that will, and you also get that kind of a qualifying statement there, right? So we're talking about, things are really bad, but there's things we could do to help. 12 is A. 13. Nilda, you want to read 13 for us?
Yes, in the last three paragraphs, the author tries to persuade his audience by using repetition to appeal to the A, sense of fear. B, sense of patriotism. C, desire for popularity. D, desire for wealth. Um, B.
Yeah, sense of patriotism. So, he mentions Americans, right? There's something special. There's something especially American in the kinds of changes. And then, we've always been proud through our history of being efficient people. We, he uses we, referring to Americans and drawing on that patriotism. We've always been proud of our ingenuity, our skill. We've always been proud of our leadership in the world. So drawing that sense of patriotism out as an appeal. So 13B as a boy, 14, and we've got to fill in the blank. So let's look here. So we'll fill this out together. The author's implicit purpose in this passage is to encourage readers to support the new what?
Is it the energy proposal?
There you go. Yeah. Energy proposals, I think. So there's multiple. So ENERGY EROPOSALS. Okay. Energy proposals for 14. Right. And 15, some drag and drop here. So emotional words. So we're going to drag and drop the words that have an emotional connotation, right? When he's appealing to emotion, he's used all these words at some point. What gives us an emotional appeal? Changes. What was that?
Yeah.
Changes has an emotional appeal.
No.
Selfish.
Catastrophe. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grandchildren.
Yeah.
Yeah. He mentions our children and grandchildren. Timid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And selfish.
Office.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Those other ones have no policy proposal changes. Those don't, evoke any type of emotion. But if you're, use strong language, catastrophe, timid, selfish, those are strong language. Grandchildren, appealing to people's, emotions about their family. So catastrophe, grandchildren, timid, and selfish for 15. Right. And now we have LEDs are the future. So talking about some lights here. So we'll read here. Make sure you're following along with me. So GE, General Electric, invented the light emitting diode in 1962. The first ones to come into wide use, glowing a space age red, turned up in the clock radios, pocket calculators, and digital watches of the 1970s. Additional colors came along over the next couple of decades. LEDs are manufactured more or less like any other semiconductor. Each diode is cut from a wafer of crystals layered over a base of silicon or sapphire. The crystal layer on early LEDs was gallium arsenide or gallium phosphide, which lent that reddish color. Additional colors and increased brightness required more nuanced control of layer composition and depth. Modern LED makers accomplish this by using precise ratios of indium, gallium, aluminum, and nitrogen for the crystal layer, which results in a bluish color. But on their own, not even advanced LEDs can produce anything suitable for the living room. The blue tinged illumination is fine for, say, a pen flashlight on a keychain, but it doesn't come close to the warm light the human eye desires. There are two ways LED makers create a more pleasant white. In the 1990s, the favored technique was to combine red, green, and blue LEDs, but they all have differing efficiencies and operating requirements. heat management, power supply, and drivers, the bulbs controlling circuit boards get more complex. So the LEDs found in current household applications are blue diodes daubed with a powdered coating called a phosphor, which includes rare earth elements that filter blue light. The phosphor is generally yellow, and depending on the composition of the phosphor and the ratio of unconverted blue light, the resulting white light can range from the warm glow preferred for home use to cooler tints more suited to, say, retail and outdoor use. Okay, so that's an expository passage, right? It's just paragraph by paragraph, and it looks like we're going to compare two different structures, right? Two different types dealing with the same information. So that was from Wired's article, The Future of Light is the LED by Dan Koppel, 2011. And now we have an FAQ, right? Frequently asked questions about energy saving bulbs. So we'll have a question and then we get some answers. So the first question, how exactly are these new bulbs better than traditional incandescent bulbs? And the first answer, or the answer is, new energy saving bulbs such as Energy Star qualified CFLs and LEDs, as well as halogen incandescent technologies, can produce the same amount of light, that's lumens, as a traditional incandescent bulb while using significantly less energy. So when you replace your traditional incandescent bulbs with the energy savers, you will pay less to get the same amount of light. Many of the newer bulbs also last significantly longer than traditional bulbs, so you won't need to replace them as often and will keep saving into the future. Energy Star LEDs use about 25% of the energy and last up to 25 times longer than traditional incandescent bulbs they replace. An Energy Star CFL uses about 25% of the energy and lasts 10 times longer than a comparable traditional incandescent bulb. Switching to energy-saving bulbs will reduce the growth of U.S. energy demand and avoid carbon emissions. Nationwide, lighting accounts for about 14% of all building electricity use, about 10% of home electricity. With the EISA standards, U.S. households could save nearly $6 billion in 2015 alone. I've noticed a theme here, right? We're dealing with like energy conservation this whole time, and so anyway, so our next question, what is the cost difference between the new lights and my incandescent bulbs? How much money will I save when I switch to these new bulbs? Upgrading 15 traditional incandescent bulbs in your home with energy saving bulbs could save you about $50 per year. While the initial price of newer light bulbs is typically higher than the inefficient incandescent bulbs you are replacing. You'll spend less each year to operate. Most CFLs pay for themselves with the energy they save in less than 9 months. Average consumers will spend about $480 to operate a traditional incandescent bulb for a year. By comparison, average consumers will spend about $1 to operate an Energy Star LED bulb, about $350 on a halogen incandescent bulb, and about $1.20 on an Energy Star CFL bulb, each that produces the same amount of light. So that is from energy.gov, frequently asked questions, lighting choices to save you money, from 2012 and accessed in 2013. And we have fill in the blank. So in paragraph 3 of the article, the word illumination means, what does illumination mean?
Light.
It's light, right? Yeah, so it's just light, L-I-G-H-T. And that's kind of, one of those context clues, right? You're not real sure about the word, think about the context in which it's used. Where is paragraph 3? I don't even have to energy.
It's in the first one. In the first passage. I didn't see it in the second one.
Is it in the third?
In the first passage.
The third one. First passage, third paragraph.
Okay. I am lost. I don't even see it. Okay, moving
You
on.
have to go up.
Anyways, but you
Yeah,
get
it's
right.
the blue thing illumination is fine for.
Okay.
Let's see.
Up, up.
Yeah, that
Let's go up.
All right. So yeah, so that is light for 16. 17, another fill in the blank here, I believe. So the signal words in paragraph 8 of the FAQs indicate that the information in this paragraph will blank the cost of different bulbs.
Increase. I mean,
estimate or give.
So 8, right? So average consumers will spend about $4.80 to operate a traditional incandescent bulb. And we got our signal words right here, by comparison, right? Oh, okay. So by comparison, so they're comparing the cost, right? It starts out with information about how much it costs to operate one traditional bulb, and then by comparison, boom, we go in and we see the other 3 options there. So that is compare for 17. Okay. And 18 into text. Let's get back to our multiple choice here. Etta, you want to read 18 for us?
okay, it says, which statement best explains the overall impact of the FAQs? A, inadequately supported arguments leave the reader with more questions than answers. B, emotional language encourages the reader to take action on the issue. C, convincing and well-supported points motivate the reader to follow the author's advice. Or D, failure to incorporate well-researched facts forces the reader to question the author's credibility. Is it D?
It's C. So we're convincing and well supported. So it's pretty thorough here. You know, it's you know, uses pretty neutral language and explaining fairly thoroughly as far as, like, you know, what the cost would be, what the cost savings are, and things like that. So 18 is C as in cat. 19, sticking with our same, yeah, our same passages. How about Christiana? You want to read 19 for us?
Okay. Which statement best describes the audience of the article and the FAQs? A, both address politicians. B, both address an audience of electrical engineers. C, the article address people with some scientific background, but the FAQs address customers. D, the article address an audience of scientists, but the FAQs address people who want to only save money. This C.
It's C, yeah, for 19. C.
Yes.
So yeah, that article gets into some, you know, a lot of sort of that scientific lingo and jargon, right? And you know, talking about diodes, talking about crystal layers, and you know, different types of crystals and elements, things like that go into making them, heat management, power supply, drivers. That's pretty technical, and it is sort of made. And you can also look at where the article comes from, right? If this was from, maybe USA Today, like a more general newspaper or something, you might see a different audience. Wired is definitely more of a technical sort of publication. If it was like Popular Science, Wired, things like that, it's for a specific audience. So that's something else you can look for. An FAQ generally speaks to a larger audience. And in this case, right, it deals more with consumers, the cost to them, any concerns, addressing sort of their concerns is like switching to new types of light bulbs. So C is in cat for 19, 20. I'm going to stick with our FAQ and article. Sasha Gay, you want to read 20 for us?
How do the article and the FAQ differ in purpose? A, the article explains the steps in the process of making LEDs, but the FAQs explain the steps in the process of replacing old bulbs with LEDs. B, the article explains how LEDs produce different colors, but the FAQs persuade readers that new bulbs save energy and money. C, the article persuades readers that LEDs produce the best quality of light, but the FAQs inform how LEDs work. D, the article persuades readers that LED saves energy, but the FAQs entertain with an anecdote about LEDs. Is it C or
It's B, yeah, right. So the article talks a lot about the different colors involved, and right, so that's an explanation. It's explanatory, and then the FAQ is looking at how much money you're going to save as you switch to LED bulbs. So yeah, that's the difference there between the two. Their purposes, they're different purposes. So B is in boy for 20. 21. Tracy, how about reading 21?
Yes. How do the article and FAQ differ in structure? A, the article is a list of steps in a process, but the FAQs show cause and effect. B, the article show main idea and detail, but the FAQs present idea list in the order of importance. See, the articles show a sequential order, but the FAQ compare and contrast information. The article is writing the straightforward paragraph from, but FAQs are question and answer.
D. Yes. Yeah. So, right, just what we talked about, that's the expository kind of straightforward paragraph form. And obviously, when we get to FAQs, right, that stands for frequently asked questions. So it is a question and answer style. You're going to see those on websites all the time where they've basically compiled the questions they get most, if it's technical stuff, a lot of times like troubleshooting or something like that. And they'll have that all just put on their site, however many times somebody's asked about a certain topic and they have a response to that. So yeah, that is Q&A while the article is straightforward. 21, D as in dog. 22, let's go to Grace for 22.
Okay. Which perspective do the two passages share? A, the United States wastes too much energy and must avoid carbon emissions. B, people must look to save on energy costs. B, rather. C, LED bulbs are the lights of the future. And D, LED bulbs produce poor lighting that cannot compare with the glow of older bulbs. Oh. C?
Yeah, C. So we get, for one, we get LEDs are the future for the title, right? And it does talk about sort of their progression, sort of how the technology's advanced and where they first appeared in that article, and then, sort of moving forward with it. And, that it's becoming more popular to use, and the light that it produces is becoming more like the light we prefer in our homes. And the same with the FAQ, right? This is talking about moving people from the traditional incandescent light bulb and getting people to start switching over. So 22 is C. 23, same text. Nilda, you read 23 for us.
Yes, on the basis of the information in the article, why would a reader of FAQs still be reluctant for to switch to LED bulbs? A, LED costs more to use than traditional bulbs. B, traditional bulbs are safer to install than LEDs. C, LEDs does not always give off the warm glow of traditional bulbs. D, traditional bulbs are easier to manufacture than LEDs. C?
Yeah, they do not give off the same warm glow. 23 is C. All right, staying with the same passage again. Back to Etta for 24.
Okay, which statement is most likely true about the authors of both the article and the FAQ? A, the author know how to manufacture energy saving bulbs. B, the authors have switched from traditional bulbs to energy saving bulbs in their homes. C, the authors test the efficiency of light bulbs for the Department of Energy. D, the authors prefer to work with the cooler, brighter tones of LED lights. Is it B?
Yeah, B. Right. They, you can, they're both talking about them positively. So that's an assumption you can make that they're both probably using them. We don't have enough information to know, where they work or if they, know how to manufacture them. I mean, obviously the author of the first passage has a lot of technical background. We can't say the same about the author of the FAQ. So 24B as in boy. And two new, we got two new passages here. So both are expository passages, and from what it looks like, we might be talking about Memorial Day here. Well, let's see. Let's read along here. So, Mr. President, Mrs. Obama, Secretary Shinseki, General Dempsey, fellow veterans, service members, and distinguished guests, Lilibet and I are greatly honored to be here with all of you today as we observe Memorial Day. Together, we gather to remember America's sons and daughters who sacrificed everything in the defense of our nation. For generations, Americans have set aside this day to honor those who have fought and died to keep our nation safe. A Civil War veteran, Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, "Every year in the full tide of spring, at the height of the symphony of flowers and love and life, there comes a pause, and through the silence we hear the lonely pipe of death." Every Memorial Day, America is reminded of these selfless individuals, America's quiet heroes. We also think of America's new generation of defenders, protecting the nation's interest in every corner of the globe, preserving our freedoms and our way of life. They work for a more peaceful and hopeful world. As General Douglas MacArthur said, "The soldier above all other people prays for peace, for he must suffer and bear the deepest wounds and scars of war." The memories of America's heroes lay to rest here at Arlington and at American cemeteries around the world are kept alive by families and communities across our great land. This Memorial Day, we honor those families whom our heroes left behind. We honor them in appreciation for the sacrifices they have endured. We also honor the perseverance and the resilience of our military families today, for they are dealing with all of the challenges of life. America thanks you. All of us in positions of trust and responsibility must always make decisions that are worthy of the sacrifices of those who serve our country. On this sacred day, as we recall the words of President Lincoln, when he referred to the mystic bonds and cords of memory, we honor America's fallen patriots by striving to be worthy of their great sacrifices as we all work toward making a better future for all mankind. And that's Memorial Day Observance by Chuck Hagel, 2013. He mentions Arlington, so that must have been at Arlington National Cemetery. Chuck Hagel was the Secretary of Defense for a good part of Obama's terms. And so that was a Memorial Day address. Let's see what the second passage is. So this says a special salute. So President Barack Obama gave a special salute Monday to Americans who lost their lives fighting in the Korean War and asked Americans to remember the troops' work in Afghanistan as that war winds down. Last Memorial Day, I stood here and spoke about how, for the first time in 9 years, Americans were no longer fighting and dying in Iraq. Today, a transition is underway in Afghanistan, and our troops are coming home. The president said after laying a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns, that's also at Arlington, this time next year, we will mark the final Memorial Day of our war in Afghanistan. Calling Virginia's Arlington National Cemetery a monument to a common thread in the American character, Obama asked the audience not to forget the men and women who are willing to give their lives and lay down their lives for the freedoms the nation enjoys. A serviceman recently wrote that president to say he feared our work in Afghanistan is fading from memory. Obama said, and he's right. As we gather here today at this very moment, more than 60,000 of our fellow Americans still serve far from home in Afghanistan. They're still going out on patrol, still living in Spartan forward operating bases, still risking their lives. And when they give their lives, they are still being laid to rest in cemeteries in the quiet corners across our country, including here in Arlington. For those of us who bear the solemn responsibility of sending these men and women into harm's way, we know the consequences all too well, Obama said. I feel it every time I meet a wounded warrior, every time I visit Walter Reed, and every time I grieve with a Gold Star family. Chuck Hagel, a former Army sergeant who volunteered for the Vietnam War and is the first enlisted combat veteran to hold the post of Secretary of Defense Secretary, told CNN's Barbara Starr that he remembers soldiers who served alongside him, including a captain who was killed 14 days into his tour. Hagel was next to him when he died, he said. Anybody who has ever been in combat remembers the names, remembers the faces, remembers the fun, remembers the uniqueness of every person, the defense secretary said. And that's from an article on CNN.com. Obama offers salute to Korean War vets as Afghanistan war winds down, 2013. So got a fill in the blank, resilience. So in paragraph 4 of the speech, does the word resilience refers to a person's ability to cope with stress or to a person's grief? Which does that?
Ability to cope. with
Ability to cope with stress. So that's a long answer. Ability to cope with stress. Yeah. And that's one of those words, it could, given a different context, speak to somebody's resilience towards grief. But in this case, it's more of their ability to deal with stress. And we'll take a look at that real quick here. So paragraph 4, right here. So in that second to last sentence, we also honor the perseverance, the resilience of our military families today, for they are dealing with all of the challenges of life, right? So you look at the context around that, challenges of life, perseverance, you're talking about coping with stress in that situation, right, in that context. So that is ability to cope with stress for 25. Now we got 26, multiple choice. Christiana, you want to read number 26?
Okay, number 26. The author, the author of the speech quotes Oliver. What was it? Please, what's the name?
Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Okay, Oliver Wendell Holmes, to show that remembering Americans fallen soldiers is a time. It's a time-honored event. B, sacrifices often must be made in the name of freedom. C, war must be fought to guarantee peace for future generations. D, choosing to send others to war is a serious responsibility. Is it D?
It's
C?
A, right? To show remembering fallen soldiers. So, a historical moment, quoting something from the past there. And in that way, quoting from someone who is observing the same holiday in the same manner. So A for 26. 27, I think we have another fill in the blank here. Yeah, so which three expressions indicate that paragraph 2 of the article is organized according to a time sequence? So we're going to write the expressions in the order in which they appear in the article. So popping up here to paragraph 2. Last Memorial Day, I stood here and spoke about how, for the first time in 9 years, Americans were no longer fighting and dying in Iraq. Today, a transition is underway. In Afghanistan, our troops are coming home. The president said after laying a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns, this time next year, we will mark the final Memorial Day of our war in Afghanistan. So what three expressions there are showing a sequence, a time sequence?
Last Memorial Day.
Yeah, last Memorial Day. You start with that.
Mhm.
Oh, LAST. Okay. I'm
Today.
wrong. Let me fix that. Memorial Day. Yeah. And
Today.
today is next, right? So we're definitely showing the passage of time. So last Memorial Day, day.
Next year.
What was that?
Oh, next year.
This time next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this time next year, we will mark the final Memorial Day of our war in Afghanistan. That was not true. 8 years later, we'll mark the last day, or about 7 years later. Yeah, so last Memorial Day, today, this time next year. And remember, that's also transitional in a sense, right? So introducing, when you're using a time sequence, so today, tomorrow, it's often offset with a comma, or, so here, last Memorial Day, comma. So in that, setting the time, right, before you continue. Today, boom, same thing, this time next year. So same way we've been talking about transitions, you can use that as well. So 27, last Memorial Day, today, this time next year. All right, 28. Sasha Gay, you want to read 28 for us?
Which perspective do the two passages share? A, those who have experienced combat always remember the others with whom they fought. B, soldiers most hope for peace because they must sacrifice the most in times of war. C, the responsible Those responsible for sending others to war are aware of the sacrifices soldiers and their family make. These servicemen and women are too often disrespected by the public. Is it C?
Yeah, C. Those responsible for sending others to war are aware of the sacrifices soldiers and their families make, right? That definitely comes across in both the speech given by Chuck Hagel and the article, the news article about Obama honoring the soldiers of the Korean War. At 29, we'll drag and drop action here. So it says drag and drop the phrases that describe the passage into the correct location on the chart. So, right, we had the speech, which was by Chuck Hagel at Arlington, and then we have the news article describing Obama's honoring Korean War vets. So, starting off, first person point of view. Which one has a first person point of view?
The speech.
The speech, right? How do we remember first person point of view?
I.
Yes, you're going to have those pronoun I, talking about yourself, basically, or that author is talking about themselves. Third person, I think we know how that goes then, right? Third person goes over here, news article, we're talking about other people, right? So he, she, they, them, we use those pronouns. We haven't seen that in a while, but yeah, so third person point of view there. And then specific audience, who's talking to a specific audience?
The speech.
The speech, yeah, because they're at the Arlington National Cemetery, right? So two attendees there, and then that leaves general audience, which is what the news article is going to be for, right? So, you know, thinking about where it appears, CNN.com, you're going to have a larger general audience that goes to a website like that. Okay, so first person's point of view for the speech, specific audience for the speech, the news article, third person point of view with a general audience. We only have 3 questions left. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to finish off, I think, here with our same passages. Okay, so 30, let's go to Tracy for number 30.
Yes, the topic, how do the speech and the article differ in purpose? A, the speech motivated audience members to join the armed forces, but the article informed readers of the sacrifice that soldiers make. B, the speech honors those who fought and died, but the article derived a memory day tribute. C, the speech persuades others to help support military families, but the article explains how to show this kind of purpose. D, the speech explores various memory day observance, but the article entertain with detail about the Memory Day celebration. The B?
B, yeah. So the speech honors those who fought and died, right? So that's, you know, what the purpose there is. But the article, right, because it's in third person, is describing a Memorial Day tribute. So yeah, different, you know, purposes. They're about the same type of event, right? They're both talking about Memorial Day, but one being a speech is in honor, while the article describes such activities occurring. B as in boy for 30. 31, Grace, you want to read 31?
Which information in the news article contribute to the credibility of the author of the speech? The author of the speech, A, quotes experienced career soldiers. B, volunteered for and saw active combat. C, is a member of President Obama's cabinet. And D, as a son and daughter in the military.
A.
B. So Chuck Hagel, where you mentioned was the Secretary of Defense there for quite some time under Obama. But we look at the article and then paragraph 7 there, Chuck Hagel, a former Army sergeant who volunteered for the Vietnam War and is the first enlisted combat veteran to hold the post of Defense Secretary. So there you get some added credibility to his speech, which of course, you know, he's not really talking that much about his own experience or anything like that. But that also gives him credibility because as himself being a combat veteran lends to him speaking, you know, in Arlington on Memorial Day. So 31B, he's volunteered for and saw active combat in Vietnam. B as in boy. Final one, 32. Let's go to Nilda.
Yes, on the basis of the information in both texts, which is the most logical conclusion to draw about men and women who serve in the military? A, they must learn to forget their combat experience. B, their long absences can cause hardships in their family lives. C, they seek fame and glory by going to war. D, their sacrifices are often taken for granted. B.
D. D as in dog. Their sacrifices are too often taken for granted. So that's sort of implied in both, right? So that's the conclusion you can draw based on what you get from both. So D as in dog for 32. And we are finished. Okay. So does anybody need to follow up here? Nilda, 14 was energy proposals. I'll type that in the chat. Energy proposals for 14. Go back here. And what was that? 28 was C. All right. Any others I need to follow up with here?
Please, number 23.
Number 3 was A.
No, 23.
23. I'm sorry. 23 was C.
Okay, thank you.
So everybody else get everything there? Okay. So yeah, I mean, you guys did really well. You know, when I post the Google Classroom, along the way through our units here, there were some tables that appear in the lessons, you know, those things like about faulty evidence and you know what to look for with those things. I'll repost those along with the unit review today, so you can take another look at that. Of course, you can always go back in the lesson and review things, and all of this is online. So if you want to review any lesson that we've hit, you know, same thing for social studies. Now that you're, you know, if there was any weak spots there, you can go back and look at the lesson, see the things that we talked about, review the questions and answers from the quizzes and workbooks. So any question on today, any question on setting up your practice test, any of that we can cover. Because we're finishing up pretty early today. Probably won't be too bad as we keep moving forward through language arts. When we were doing this in the fall, and that's actually when I started, you know, I just started with language arts and we were finishing up pretty early most days. For some reason, it seems like doing the 2 language arts classes goes quicker than it does doing the 1 social studies, 1 language arts. But anyway, I'm finishing up here. I'm going to email Tracy with everybody's name and get you guys set up for that practice test. I'll check in with you guys later in the week to see how things are going. Remember, you can always text me if there's any questions. You can email me. You know, if you run into any problems or anything, Rachel and I are always here for you guys. But yeah, that's, you know, moving along here. I mean, we're setting up that social studies exam. another few weeks, we'll be getting towards the end of language arts. We're going to start working on some writing practice. So let's wrap it up today then. There's no questions. Everybody's got all the answers. Let's meet tomorrow at 12:15 for some more.